Hello and welcome to the Rewilding the Artist podcast, focusing on a culture of care in the arts, a place of inspiration, supporting you to bring a culture of care into your environment, whether you're a freelance practitioner or arts organisation. I'm your host, visual artist and changemaker, Gaia Redgrave. Today I'd like to welcome Steffan Jones Hughes, visual artist and director of Oriel Davies, a contemporary art gallery in Newtown, Mid Wales, and all-round wonderful human being. He has worked in the visual arts both nationally and internationally for many, many years, and he tells me his career has always been in the arts, and it's quite a family affair with his parents in the arts previously, and now his children too. So welcome, Steffan, to the Rewilding the Artist podcast. And it's lovely to see you again.
It's lovely to see you too, Gaia. Thank you so much for that introduction. And thank you so much for considering me to be on the podcast. It's really nice to be here.
Thank you. I really wanted to speak to you, Steffan, and showcase the work of Oriel Davies, both yourself and your team. I've personally found Oriel Davies and its team to be very welcoming. For me, it's a place where genuine care is exhibited in relation to how a person experiences that space, whether that be a visitor or a staff member. So within your position as director of Oriel Davies, when did you start thinking about accessibility and a culture of care? And why do you feel that it's important?
Well, I think for me, in terms of my ethos, I've always been interested in creating conditions in which people feel valued and feel that their needs are being met. So I suppose that has been part of my thinking for a long, long time. You know, I'm kind of mid-50s, so I've been working in the arts since I was early 20s. So, you know, it's a long time. And over that time, as society's changed, actually, I suppose that our awareness of people's needs and the diversity of those needs have become more central to people's thinking. I think a big point for me probably came in the early 90s when I attended, at that time I was working for Tate Liverpool, and I was doing I did a training day in deaf awareness training, and that was so interesting because I suddenly started to think about things from a slightly different perspective in terms of, you know, one of the questions I remember was, could you give examples of disability in film? And I found it quite easy to do that. But I was surprised at how many people found it really difficult. And I was kind of thinking, oh yeah, but because there's so many examples of people with different disabilities or different abilities that have been represented on screen. I think that my ethos as a director is not to make anybody feel like they are different with a negative connotation, but that they are included within a positive idea. So the way that Oriel Davies works, it relies really heavily on a team approach where everybody in that team is valued and respectful of one another, and it's a bit like a family.
Mm.
And that isn't the first time that I've kind of worked like that. You know, when I was arts manager for Wrexham County Borough Council, that was the ethos there as well. And the idea was that we all worked as a team, and then we all contribute to the sense of belonging that people can get from a place. Because, you know, well, we wouldn't be, as a gallery, you know, we're a public space, so we wouldn't be here if we didn't have visitors. It's really important. And artists wouldn't have an audience for their work if we didn't show the work and we didn't have people coming in to see it. And so I think probably what we try to do is make everybody in our community and wider community feel welcomed warmly into our space, whether they're working for us or whether they're, and when I say for us, I think I probably mean with us, when they're working with us or when they're visiting us. And I suppose that the way I've viewed it is almost like, well, Oriel Davies is like a house, and we invite people into our house to become friends with people. And then by finding out about our friends, we learn more. And so long as we come to things with a sense of prepared to listen, prepared to get things wrong, prepared to be open and transparent, we have the opportunity to invite those people in and for them to help shape what we are, who we are. Does that help?
It certainly does. And it's interesting to hear that what might be considered as your defining moment maybe came through some awareness training. So it's good to hear that that kind of thing is working, and things like that people are responding to, and the way that you've taken it forward sounds amazing. So thinking about what you were saying about a sense of belonging for people that are coming into your space. I mean, I've certainly felt that as a visitor and a visual artist who's previously worked with you as an organisation. Would you like to talk about, or do you have any examples that you'd like to talk about, practical examples as how this ethos has exhibited in your space, maybe for visitors, maybe for artists that you've worked with?
There are just so many examples. And I suppose more recently, you know, you talked a bit, you responded there to the awareness training. One of the things that we've been doing quite a lot over the past 12 months is visual awareness training, where we've been working with blind, partially sighted people and learning about how to support those people on a visit to a visual art space. And that's just been fantastic and just so rewarding on so many levels. Another example would be when we invited you in to talk to us about your lived experience, and actually how that was really useful because it gave people within the organisation a voice and an opportunity to explore their own needs, and it really helped us to sort of reconnect with how do we make sure that people feel comfortable in their workspace and also feel comfortable in the gallery as well. There's the two sides of it, one the visitor perception and one the staff perception. And I think that working in a way that allows you to reflect on people's needs and to ask what would make life easier for you as an employee, whether it's taking part in some creative activities yourself, whether it's taking advantage of some of our mindfulness activities we do. So for example, last week I got involved in chair yoga, which was really fantastic. And it just really grounded me for an hour in my day and helped to enable me to approach the afternoon on that day. We've run a lot of sessions, sort of practical making sessions, skills-based sessions in the green spaces that surround us here in Newtown. We're in a sort of mid-century art gallery that was built as a gallery space, but it was a shared space with other community groups when it was originally opened. It's since become a completely, as Oriel Davies, it's become this completely self-contained art gallery. And we only show contemporary art. We don't have a collection as such, so the exhibitions change on a regular basis. But we're also located quite close to the town centre and in an area of parkland by the River Severn. What we've tried to do is to demystify the arts and to sort of make arts really accessible, because the local audience here in Newtown is really varied, but we don't have a university in Powys. We don't, a lot of people have to leave the county for further and higher education. There is a college in town, but most of those students will go on to places outside of Wales or certainly outside of Powys. And so with that in mind, if we were to show exhibitions that were all very academic and really kind of effete, maybe, just that thing of being not connected necessarily. I really love challenging contemporary art. It's really important that we can show that, but at the same time, we have to understand as a gallery that our role is to help with engagement and to bridge that gap and to sort of make work relevant. So in order to do that, we look quite often at skills. So using your hands to make things that relate to the exhibitions that we're looking at, but also connect to place. And we do that with a local audience. Primarily it's free wherever we can. We try and do free things for our local audiences where we can, and they're able to access training, skills development that is in its way already a mindful activity. So whether it is a purely mindful thing like yoga, like Tai Chi, or any of those sorts of meditation exercises, all of those things. Or it could be, for example, spoon carving in the middle of a woodland coppice in the park, where you have a fire in the middle of the space and people stand around at their sort of stations and carve tools from lumps of wood, where you're really experiencing that tactile thing of slowing down and understanding the worth or the value of having skills, understanding the value of something in terms of how much love, care, passion has gone into the making of something, and allowing time for reflection. So whether it's that or whether it's a poetry, creative writing exercise down by the river, or whatever it happens to be, we try to make all of these activities accessible to our visitors so that there's some underlying core values there that we're exploring around care.
That's really interesting, because when you started speaking about all the things that you're doing within Oriel Davies, I was thinking, wow, there's so many practical things that you're doing there that are making a difference. But there's an extra dimension. There's an extra dimension, and I can't put my finger on it. And that dimension, I think, is the dimension that you related to about making. That making happens with love, care, and passion. So that extra dimension within Oriel Davies, would you say, over and above delivering something practical difference, is love, care, and passion? Would you agree with me with that, or am I speculating there?
No, I think we all feel like that about what we do as a team. We go above and beyond to be able to make sure that those things happen. But I think primarily it's about making friends. And I think if you treat people with love, care, and respect, and you listen, you get back what you give. So there's this really lovely thing that happens at Oriel Davies, which I'm sure happens in lots of other places actually, but it happens here. And what could look like a fortress in the middle of a green space opens up to be this warm, welcoming, friendly home where you can come and you'll probably see someone who you can have a chat with, who you can have a conversation about. I mean, some of the conversations that you hear are just so amazing. And people are just really open with one another when they come into the space. And I think that's partly because they feel comfortable. And, you know, so for example, at the moment, we've got an exhibition of contemporary visual art as part of Artist Monday. And on the surface, that exhibition, because it's an international artist, it's great that we're doing a partnership with Artist Monday because that's across Wales thing. But it's an artist who hadn't previously been to Newtown, and all of our work connects with place. Mm-hmm. So, because one of the biggest things for me here was to try to make our program relevant to local people and to fix it in our own story, our Milltir Square, our square mile of, you know, it's in a tiny town in the middle of a rural community in the largest, least populated county of Wales, which makes up about a third of Wales, actually. So it's big county, which brings with it its own set of problems, particularly around isolation and loneliness, because, you know, people if they don't get out, do things, they're not going to they might not meet somebody for a week or two at home. So so it's really important to sort of have that sense that people can come to here and feel that it's theirs and that there'll be something here for them. So making our work relevant, looking at stories, looking at the seven, and on the surface, these things. So I'll just list a few things. We've got the seven, we've got Price Jones, we've got Laura Ashley, we've got Robert Owen, and we've got Green Spaces. So let's take Green Spaces and the seven first. We're really interested in how that can have a connection with contemporary art, how we can explore those stories. So, for example, with the seven and Green Spaces, it immediately connects us to the global issues of climate emergency. There's flooding on the seven, there's salmon that swim up and down the seven, there are chicken farms along the seven, there's issues of pollution. But yeah, so what it allows us to do is to explore global issues locally. And that's what we've done with the Artist Monday exhibition, because Carolina Casedo, whose work we're showing, it looks at the impact of damming on rivers, and it looks at the way that we take things out of the earth and don't really give things back. And also it looks at protest and how people can make a difference, how one person can make a difference. And one person is never just one person. There'll always be people who we can connect with. And so we've done all sorts of things with this exhibition. We've had our local community choir meet with a community choir from Cardiff. We've brought our Syrian community into that group so that they're having dialogue and singing and dancing. And it's just, what we try to do is make those things happen because what they do in turn is create community cohesion, create a better place to live, create friendships, basically. So what were the other three were Laura Ashley, Robert Owen, and Price Jones. So Price Jones, we are built as a gallery, we're built on the rubble of the home of Price Jones, the Price Jones family.
A new home on a home.
So what we'll do, we're working with the Clwyd and Powys Archaeological Trust, CPAT, who are doing a dig in the green spaces, and will allow them to use our place to showcase some of the finds, because that roots us really deeply into that. And Price Jones set up a mail order business in Newtown, which basically is the model for Amazon today. So it's like really tight, small, local thing that then becomes this thing that's relevant internationally and globally. And then with Laura Ashley, we've been working with people to develop a program called Walkie Talkies, where so Laura Ashley, we discovered that Laura Ashley used to have meetings with her key managers and team, and ran Laura Ashley in almost like a family as well. So because that was one of the main employers in this area, it's a bit like a coal mine, if you imagine when the coal mines were shut in the 80s, and whole communities were just left with no work. The same could be said for something like Laura Ashley, where everybody that comes into the space knows somebody who worked for Laura Ashley. Anyway, so this idea of Walkie Talkies, which is funded by the Laura Ashley Family Foundation, we've kind of been going to different sites along the route between Mac, where her first shop was, right the way through to Welshpool. And along that route, we've been developing some routes where people can gather and talk creatively about ideas, meet up in a very sort of informal way. We have no definite outcomes from this part of that project. It will develop into something in time, but at the moment it's just about bringing people together to experience that sociable activity and walking with a creative person to develop something creative. And then Robert Owen could be described as the father of the cooperative movement, and there are lots of cooperatives in Newtown, and we work quite closely with a lot of them. One of the projects that we've done, which is called Wellbeing in Green Spaces, and it was funded by Welsh Government, but it meant that we were able to work in really close partnership with Open Newtown, who manage the green spaces, with Cultivate, who are a food cooperative, growers cooperative, the local wildlife trust. And we kind of all came together and we were able to develop a series of activities, including large scale autumn fairs, spring fairs. We had a craft fair where we focused on makers' work, and all of it had mindfulness and well-being at its core. So it was all geared to building those relationships, to creating opportunities for social engagement, where it's not that they didn't exist, but maybe where there wasn't a kind of ongoing support in order to really establish the roots for strong community engagement.
I think that these ideas, that building community, befriending people, supporting the well-being of your community and individuals and the artists that you work with, visitors as well. I think the difference within Oriel Davies is that these really are in the foundation of what you work, what you do, as opposed to this project is about well-being, which is in addition to everything else we do. It's not something, it's not a side dish. It's the whole banquet.
Yeah, it
It's the
is.
whole banquet. That's the difference. And I've been trying to pinpoint what the difference is, because it is quite a different environment. It is homely. It is a wonderful space to be. The energy that you've created in that space by building those connections with community, by building those friendships, is actually imbued in the whole of the building. You feel it when you come in. So I
That's
hadn't
great to
actually
hear.
pinpointed it before now, but in conversation with you, I think that's what I really wanted to drill down to understand. And yeah, it's the fact that you've made this well-being, the bringing the community together into your home, which is their home, and that spills out into the wider environment, so people know that they're welcomed into the embrace of this space. That's the difference. You might argue against me, I don't know, but to me, that's the difference.
It's so wonderful to hear you say that, because it is really important, and it's not about one person's. One person can make a difference. We can all make a difference, but we can only make that difference if we work together. So, this idea of together we're stronger is absolutely right. As an organization, if if one of us starts to go down an avenue that looks completely different to everything else we're doing, they need to justify why they're going down that avenue, because otherwise it doesn't really make sense to us as a whole, as a collective body. I mean, that just doesn't happen with our team. We know obviously we're an organization, so we have a business plan and we have a vision and a strategy, and we're kind of looking towards a mission and that achieves this, and this. And we all live that, which doesn't mean that it doesn't go unquestioned. And it doesn't mean that it's like dictatorial, because that those mission statements, those aims and ambitions are worked out as they come from conversation. They do not come from one place. The conversation is obviously always going to be started by somebody, but then it develops into an ethos by sharing and recognizing the value and of listening to each other is really, really important, because it could so easily go in the other direction, where you're all really amazing at your jobs, but you don't talk to each other, or you work remotely and you know what you want to do, and you're going to have the best exhibition ever, but engagement isn't really part of it. So I'm not going to, I've worked in environments where that's been the case, and it's just impossible. You just don't get that. There's no real understanding that actually all the time, everything's changing all the time, and nothing stays the same. And none of us are irreplaceable. We're all able to manage, but that's not to say we're not valued. And there's a difference there, because you could work in an environment where you feel completely valueless.
Absolutely.
But everybody here is valued, but we all know that it's important to understand that at some point we may want to move on. We may have to leave for a different reason. There might be something else that comes along. Whatever reason, because it's a strong unit of people, and because our wider reach in terms of, we've got this core, quite small core team, And then we've got lots of freelancers and artists and facilitators and makers and people who can cook and all these sorts of things that kind of come into the mix. And then the next ring is that kind of people that know them. And it makes it that the organization is a strong organization, fit for purpose, actually, and able to adapt to really challenging times, because, you know, these are really challenging times. And no matter how well you do, you might not have enough money to do all the things that you want to do. So how are you going to do them?
That's
You will
interesting. Yeah, that's interesting that you were speaking, you started to talk about difficulties financially, potentially because of the difficult times, just because of the way things are. What I wanted to ask is that you've spoken a lot, and we've spoken a lot about all the wonderful things that Oriel Davies is doing. However, what challenges, and this may come down to financial, I don't know, what challenges have you experienced in being able to create this environment, this supportive environment, this home? Have there been some notable challenges that you see might happen elsewhere that you can tell us about how you've overcome them?
There have, you know, any period of change, any change in an organization is always going to be problematic if it hasn't changed before. You know, if it's kind of found a way to work and stuck to that way of working, even though maybe the environment that they're working in has changed dramatically, they're still doing that thing. And I think at that point, you do have to take some tough decisions, and you do have to think about the structure of your organization. I mean, I was struck by, in the Utopia's Bar podcast, the first podcast, with their job titles, which I absolutely loved. Sometimes job titles have to change, and sometimes our roles have to change, and sometimes you can't afford to do anything because things haven't changed for so long. So that's one area where that is a challenge. That's always going to be a challenge. But looking at the moment at how arts organisations are struggling against the backdrop of things like increases in the cost of energy, you know, cost of living crisis, so people aren't necessarily travelling quite so much, and funding changes in funding. It's really, we came up with a budget for next year in sort of October last year, and it's had to change so many times because the goalposts keep changing. I'm always really grateful for what we have. You know, if we are doing a job that's allowing us to receive from outside of the organization, that's brilliant. We're also a lot more entrepreneurial as a gallery. So we have a shop where we sell primarily work that's created in Wales. We have a cafe which has been redeveloped. It used to be part of the organisation as a commercial element. Then it became like a franchise.
Mm-hmm.
Then it became a sublease, and then COVID came, and it was nothing. And the space just, you know, it was eventually, after a few turns in the road, we decided to take the cafe back in house, but as part of our organisation, as a really important part of our organisation. So it's all local. It's about sustainability. It's about vegetarian. It's about understanding the beauty of things that are made. So whether we have a very limited offer, we only do soup, we only do cakes, we use handmade cups. The lampshades are sustainably made from seaweed and paper in Pembrokeshire by T. Simmel. The forks, knives and forks, are handmade in a small factory in the Peak District by David Mellor. Because I think we all deserve the best. So we all deserve that opportunity to hold something that has been made from scratch using local ingredients, and to eat it, which is a really intimate act, but to eat with objects that have been handcrafted, it's so important that people understand the difference between that and something that's stamped out on the other side of the world in its millions. This is something that's much more carefully considered. And why shouldn't everybody have access to that? I mean, obviously, I know the reason it's because it's so expensive, but it is important to recognise that value, actually.
It makes my heart so glad and full of joy, what you're saying. Just the simple concept of the fact that your cafe has now become an expression of your ethos and offers that joy and value to other people through the nourishment of soup and the joy and often indulgence of a piece of cake. It's such a gentle but important, and although it's simple, it could be seen as quite a radical concept. And I just love that. I just love that.
You know, and even things like, so in order to do all of that, we moved all the lighting over to LED. So that's a better solution for us. As an organisation, it's cheaper to run, but also it's better to do that because it's using less electricity. All of the vegetable peelings from making that soup. So, for example, I know that last summer we made 1 week we made some really delicious tomato soup. We went to a greenhouse on the edge of town and chose 3 or 4 kilos of ripe tomatoes, brought them back here, used a bit of rosemary, which we'd scavenged from the community beds, and made this most amazing soup. And then all of the things that were the peelings, it's zero waste, you know, all of it's zero waste. So we also compost everything on site, so that the reason for that is we're creating a small amount of compost, a relatively small amount of compost on site for a group of, it does happen to be men, a group of men who volunteer. They're volunteer gardeners. They work with a coordinator and they plant the areas around the gallery. So it's cyclical. So, you know,
absolutely.
The milk's organic, it's bottled. So the packaging's recycled. The milk comes from a farm 3 miles away. You know, it's just like, that's what life should be like.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It doesn't come from, every aspect of what we do is treated as a mini environment in a way. And part of an environment, a culture of care, is to ensure that the next generation have something to inherit, and that they come to places like this that allow them to see that it's possible to live in that way. I'm not saying it's the only way, because that's not what we're about, but it's just giving options to people, and sort of, you know, because so many people don't even think about what they what they eat with. Never mind what they eat, but what they eat with. Or, you know, it could equally be a material that they use to draw with, you know. So we have had, as part of the mindfulness well-being workshops, we did charcoal making.
Oh,
so
beautiful.
Like from scratch, making charcoal, which they then used to draw, and it connected with the exhibition, which was charcoal drawings. And, you know, I mean, it's just, and that's sustainable as a process, as a thing. I'm not saying that we all need to live like this, but having access to places that show the possibility, when the other option is McDonald's, Wetherspoons, Costa, you know, kind of multinational companies. I'm not knocking those companies. Those companies, there's a place for everything. But it's like, if society is geared in one direction and no other voices can be heard, then when we're on a circle that's downward spiraling, whereas actually what we need to do is move up. Does that make any sense?
It does make sense, and it's wonderful to hear it, Steffan. Thank you. Thank you. Everybody around you is seen and heard and valued. Fantastic. It looks like you've looked at every individual aspect, which is wonderful, and it must have taken a lot of time. And on that note, talking about a lot of time, we're drawing to the end of this conversation. And normally I'll be asking people just one thing at the end of it, but I'm going to ask you two, if that's okay. Just because I'm going to be a bit cheeky. The first one, I'll give you both questions at the same time. The first one, is there a takeaway that you could provide for others, maybe in a different position, that want to do something of their own? So maybe other organizations that want to create a culture of care, not necessarily exactly the same as you, culture of care within their mold. Do you have one takeaway for them as a starting point? And the other question is, no, I'll wait with the other question. It's a quick one.
Well, as a takeaway, I would say it's probably quite simple. It's create an environment in which you give people the opportunity to talk and listen. And that could be, and actually also, just as an addition to that takeaway, preferably with food, because it really helps. We need to open up and be prepared to not dumb down, but wise up. You know, listen to people, find out what their interests are, find out what they like doing, what they aspire to, and then look at that in a position of such entitlement. You know, I am in a position of entitlement, and I recognize that. But to be in that position, we need to, as leaders, listen and sometimes make difficult choices to make changes. Now, I don't know if that's a takeaway or if that's a rolling buffet, but it's all to do with listening.
Thank you. The other cheeky question, well, it's not a cheeky question. It goes back to something we were talking about earlier, and you mentioned earlier. That what I wanted to ask was, you were talking about the Utopia's Back, and you said you like their job titles. What would your Utopia's Back-esque job title be?
Gosh. Do you know, I'm not sure. I mean, I like the idea that a job title isn't necessarily hierarchical, and their job titles do not sound hierarchical. And I think, and this goes back to another takeaway, I suppose. One of the best things that I did within this organization was, there's a space here called the director's office. It's currently vacant, and that's because I use it to store my bike first of all. But second of all, it's because I moved into the main body of the office, and that is so useful, because what that, you can ask my team, but it can be awful because I have to think about so many things at the same time, and they're all so good with me. They have to listen a lot. but I think the big thing is being aware of what everybody in the team is working on without having the formality. I mean, we do have a weekly team meeting, but without that, or in addition to that formality, having the opportunity to suddenly think, oh, actually, this, and this, and that connects to that. And, oh, I know someone who can help with that. So that your networking is centralized rather than being, I mean, we do you know what? I think the basis for this is remote working during lockdown. So during lockdown, we all worked remotely when we weren't on furlough or whatever, but we as a team all had the opportunity. And even when we were on furlough, I think we had a weekly catch up in terms of more of a social thing than anything. But it just works so well to have the opportunity to all be in one space at one time. It's better in real life than it is online, but it is possible to do it online. And I think that just that sharing of ideas and understanding what everybody's doing this week or next week or the week after or next year even, really, really helps to create that coherence and understanding, because there's nobody in this organization who can say, I just don't know what we do. I don't know where we're going. I don't know what we're meant to be working on. Because actually, if you're not over busy, somebody else in the team will want some help somehow. So you kind of are always busy, but never too busy. That's maybe not, that's pushing it a bit, I think. Sometimes we do get too busy.
Thank you, Steffan, for that. And thank you for speaking to me today and sharing, really, your home with me.
Oh.
I really appreciate it. It's always a joy to speak to you. And thank you for you and your team for doing what Oriel Davies does so well and brings community and family together.
Oh, thank you so much, Gaia. It's honestly been so nice to talk to you. I hope I made enough sense this afternoon. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you in real life again at some point soon.
That would be lovely.
Yeah.
This podcast sits within the Rewilding the Artist project, an innovative journey to equity and authentic self-expression, kindly supported by the Arts Council of Wales Lottery Fund. This podcast can be found on Spotify and YouTube. You can find Rewilding the Artist on Instagram and further resources on the website. All links can be found in the description. Thank you for listening and enjoy the journey.